Welcome to another edition of Elevate Your Grind, brought to you by the Cannabis Lab. I am your host, Todd Rosales, and welcome to a shortened work week here. Although the work is never short here at Elevate Your Grind, we just don't do any of it. We come on the internet every once in a while and we talk to you folks, and that's a hell of a job that I have right there. We've got some awesome episodes coming up. We're going to slow things down. We got super aggressive there, doing like 4, 5, 6 shows a week. That's a lot of work. So we're going to slow things down. We've got a library of about 76, 78 episodes, something like that for you guys to enjoy. You can check those out. youtube.com/elevateyourgrind. The whole library is there. Make sure you subscribe. We're going to slow them down to about 1 live episode a week. We're going to be coming out with 2 of our recorded episodes a week. We've got a backlog of about 18 of them for you guys. So definitely something to check out. Some awesome ones coming up. Next week, or actually at the end of this week, we're going to be talking to Shada Tarabi of the To Be Blunt podcast. When I was doing my due diligence with Jeremy Jacobs, Shada, I checked out her podcast. I really enjoyed it. So after that, I figured let her and I get on together and BS a little bit for you and see what happens when we bring 2 podcast hosts together. After that, we're going to bring back our friends David and Eric Ron from Seed to Sale Insurance. They'll be on September 15th. And then on September 22nd, we have Lawrence Horowitz of Entourage Effect Capital. You saw Cody way back at the beginning of this podcast. Now check out Lawrence. He is one of the youngest people there. And I'm really interested to hear about someone who went straight from college directly to investing in cannabis without passing go and without collecting $200. Well, on the topic today, because I suck at transition, so I'm going to take that natural transition, we have one of the original investment funds in the cannabis space with us today. The gentleman today, we've met in passing like hundreds of times at different conferences. We've never actually sat down and spoke to each other. I've seen panels he's done. I've only done a few, so maybe he's seen 1 or 2 of mine. But I'm actually excited that instead of just shaking hands, saying hi like we usually do, we're actually going to be able to sit down and talk. Please welcome the president and co-founder of Tress Capital, David Hess. David, thanks for joining me, man.
Thank you, Todd, and thank you for all the contributions that you're making to our industry. It's so important, and although we haven't met in person, I am a fan of the podcast. I mean, we haven't sat down and spoke at length in person. I am a huge fan of the podcast and everything that you do for the industry. So again, thank you for that, Todd.
Thank you. I'm glad that people are a fan of me getting to do something that I love to do. I get to sit down and talk to everybody who's shaping this industry. This is second nature for me, man. I love doing this and I will continue to do it. I hope that conversations like this will actually open up. I'm not looking to actually target our industry. I'm looking to target everybody outside of our industry to say, hey, come look at us. Look what we're doing. We're doing great out there. And your story is actually in line with that, right? So not to just jump in with both feet, but there are many people who approach this industry. Everybody in the industry is passionate, and there's 2 camps. There are people who had experience with cannabis, and there are also the people who had some kind of tragedy that brought them into this industry. Can you give us a little bit of your backstory with cannabis, right? I think it's an incredible story that a lot of people need to hear.
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, I'm originally from LA. And so, although I was introduced to the benefits of medical cannabis while undergoing cancer treatment, unfortunately, at Sloan Kettering here in New York in 2000 and then again 2002, I was actually one of those early advocates for Prop 215. As a senior in high school, I was gathering signatures as a part-time job, and so really my relationship with cannabis goes back a long ways. But as I mentioned, I was diagnosed with synovial sarcoma back in 2000. And yeah, the only oncologist that would really give me a chance at survival was here in New York at Sloan Kettering. And I was able to medicate with cannabis really throughout the first bout. I had a surgery, and then I had about 8 weeks of radiation. And so medicating with cannabis, was fine. It was really my second bout, and that kept me in the hospital for a better portion of a year. And I really wasn't able to get out of bed at a certain point. and medicating with cannabis, you know, outside of Sloan Kettering with friends and family was just, you know, went out the window. And what was interesting was that, you know, there I was 22, so I was relatively young, but, you know, I was on a pediatric floor, so I was the adult on the floor, and it sucked. You know, my roommates, and yeah, you have roommates unless, you know, once in a while I got really sick and had to be isolated, but for the most part, I had roommates, and they were real young. They were like 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, and unfortunately, I say it plural because, and I usually get choked up. You know, they weren't going home, Todd. They were going someplace else, and the amount of pain that I experienced, you know, myself, and then witnessed with my roommates was just unbearable. And it got to the point, as I mentioned, I couldn't get out of bed myself, and wasn't eating. I was getting depressed, and by nature, I'm someone that likes to give. I'm a giver. I like to help, and I was on the other side of that, right? When someone's in bed like that and really immobile, they're takers, and it was something new to me, and something it was really hard for me to accept, and it just messed with my brain, messed with my head, and in addition to the physical pain that I was experiencing, and I just wanted to end it. I said to my oncologist one day, I said, you know, I remember when you told me you were going to bring me to the brink of death, and I even remember, you know, signing off on it, but I don't know if I believed you fully. And now you've taken me to the point where I believe you, and this is starting to feel a little bit too close to suicide than it is healing. And I want it to end. And I luckily, someone handed me an article about Marinol, of all things, right? And at that point, obviously, aside from maybe the occasional brownie that someone would bake, you know, this is back in 2002, there really weren't tinctures on the market or mints or any of these great things we can take today, sort of lying in a hospital bed. It was either smoke or, like I said, you know, you have a brownie that someone would make, and who knows what that would do, and how often someone would bring it by, right? And so there I was with my article on Marinol, and I sort of defiantly gave it to my oncologist and said, here, if you prescribe me Marinol, I'll stay, right? And they looked at me and they said, you know, okay, you know, we haven't prescribed it yet. In fact, I don't think the pharmacy in-house has it, but let's see if there's a place in Manhattan that does. And sure enough, you know, there was one place that had Marinol, and within an hour of me taking that cannabis pill, I was laughing again, and I was telling jokes to my nurses and asking my friends to come by for Monday Night Football and bring wings. And they were like, wings? What? You know, like, you're not eating. And I said, well, I am. And they said, well, it can't be. I just saw you yesterday and you were on your deathbed. And I said, well, that part hasn't changed, but I don't care anymore. You know, I'm okay to, you know, whatever they want to give me, I'm good. And that was because of the Marinol. And there I was, you know, like literally like watching movies and having munchies, like I said. And it was a paradigm shift for me. It was why does this work, right? And coming from LA, I understood what, you know, we had these medicinal cannabis laws in effect since 1996, although that really wasn't, you know, what was going on, right? It was a way for people essentially to cultivate and distribute, you know, to adult use, you know, cannabis users without going to jail. And sometimes that wasn't even the case, right? It was real great. And so, you know, for me, there I was, like I said, as a patient, and really had this paradigm shift and really thought to myself, there was medical efficacy here. And maybe there is such a, you know, there is something to this medicinal cannabis, right? And so I wanted to learn as much as I could. And so thankfully at that point we had Google, and I was looking up, anybody that was doing, you know, any kind of experimentation or study or white paper on cannabis, and started learning about all the different cannabinoids. Obviously we know now, right? It's much more than THC and CBD, right? Yeah. There's 100+ cannabinoids. We've got flavonoids, we've got terpenes, we've got the entourage effect, full spectrum, broad spectrum, all these different, terms and molecules. And I wanted to understand as much as I could. And so, thank you to the Bonnie Goldsteins of the world and to the Ethan Russos that would take my call back then and take the time to really explain things to me. And, it's really such an amazing plant that everyone should have access to. And yeah, that for me was just, what really drives my passion. And hopefully, it will help highlight the credibility and the validity that cannabis has. I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if it weren't for cannabis.
It's an incredible story. And the fact that so many of these stories have happened, I said earlier, I've done 78 episodes of this podcast, and I would probably say 50% of the people who come on have a story, not about themselves, but about somebody, a family member with them, right? And It's incredible to me that these stories are not being broadcast more, that there's not a collection of them somewhere that we can just hand to legislators and say, no, here's proof that it works. And these are some debilitating diseases that you as a government are pumping money into research on, and you're refusing to do this cannabis thing because of so many different reasons. I mean, I can get on a soapbox all day long about this, but you're proof right then and there. Now, let me ask you a personal question. I had, I'm going to butcher his name, Dr. Oludare Odomasu from Zalira Therapeutics on the podcast last episode. And we were talking about cannabis for cancer treatment. And, we had basically said that a lot of times it actually just kind of improves quality of life. It doesn't exactly attack the virus. Now, I've since learned that could be different. Actually, an interview that you did, I learned that. But at the time, do you think the Marinol was just kind of making your journey easier, or was it actually helping with the cancer itself?
So, did the Marinol contribute, in a apoptosis sort of way and have, ironically, the cancer kill itself and commit suicide? As I mentioned, that's kind of the way I was feeling the chemo was doing to me. I don't know, right? We, unfortunately, our government for too long wasn't letting the scientists study the positive effects of cannabis. They would pay for them to do negative stories, right? And the negative effects of cannabis, that can be funded. But on the positive side, they were not funding it. What we do know is that since the 90s, since the mid to late 90s, they were doing trials in places like Israel with humans, right? They've been studying cannabinoids and cannabis since the 60s, thanks to Dr. Meshulam and his team. But real studies with humans, they've been happening. And it has been proven, certain strains have been proven to cause apoptosis. So I think we're a ways away until we've got better studies done, wider studies done, peer-reviewed studies done, and we get to a point where we're using, cannabis or even cannabis as an ingredient to either treat or even cure cancers. Obviously, it's not the first, the first channel that people look to when they get sick, but certainly it's a channel people should be incorporating into their routine because we don't know. We do have a lot of, anecdotal stories, like you said, and I believe that the government does know it, and they know that there's efficacy here, and that's why they've got patents and all that. And I think it's a matter of when they want to adopt cannabis reality, and come around. But I don't think we're that far away from seeing that. And then once we do, then we'll see the changes when it comes to studies, and we'll see. I believe we will get to the point where cannabis will prove to be, in fact, a cancer killer and a cancer cure. Whether it did that for me, I don't know. But 100%, as I mentioned, without the cannabis, I wouldn't be here because I would have stopped 2 rounds into chemo, right? And then as far as, controlling pain, for example. Even today, all these years out, the cancer for me was located in my foot. Weird area for it to be found. In fact, synovial sarcoma a lot of times will present maybe in the thigh or someplace like that. And thankfully for me, because you don't really see or feel it unless, like it happened for me, it happened to be growing on a nerve. So it was growing on a nerve right under my foot. So if I wasn't literally standing on it, right, I wouldn't have known. And so, yeah, I think that to use cannabis as an adjunct, like I've been doing for my pain treatment. I mean, after 2 surgeries in a foot, there's not much left, right? Think about it. They scoop out, some part of your foot, especially like right on the bottom. Foot's not that big to begin with. And so, they give me literally 300 pills of opiates a month to control my pain. And I mean, I wouldn't be able to function if I were taking that to control my pain. And that's how they expect me to do it. And so if it weren't for cannabis, that might be my only option, or lie in bed. I don't know. And that's not acceptable either. And so with cannabis, I'm able to take, literally if I take 100 of those a month, it's because I was doing a lot of walking or a lot of exercising or something. And to be able to take 30% less of what I'm prescribed for pain, I think that's very, very special. And I'm really looking forward to all the different studies that are going to be done, in the future. There are great studies being done now, but in the near future, once we open this up here in North America, we're going to see a whole lot more. But for now, we're going to have to rely on our friends in Israel and other places to keep studying and informing the rest of us.
I'm not sure if you realize this, but for someone who has pain in their foot, New York is not the best choice of cities to live in.
No, it's not.
We could probably get that pill usage down a little bit more if we got you somewhere where you'd be driving more. But, I try to make a joke out of it. But I imagine, going back to that scenario, especially being in the pediatric unit, just your change of mood and you becoming more positive, and that you almost became a role model for a lot of the kids that were in those units, right? When you're a little kid and you see someone, even though 22, 23, you think, that you kind of, I don't want to say idolize them, but you look up to them. And especially you being there and going from, I don't want to call you mopey or anything else like that, but someone who is depressed and on the verge on death's door. And just when that the switch flipped and you had Marinol, that it was a positive influence on everybody else. And then seeing that, I can only imagine the spirits. Prescribing you that drug probably changed the outlook from an entire unit of the hospital, right?
100%.
And I think that's incredible.
100%. And that's really what drives my passion. I want to make cannabis available for everyone, right? Whether it's medical patients, whether it's those that choose, to consume cannabis, after work, before bed, whatever it may be. It's a plant. It's a sustainable plant. It's great for the environment. It's great for so many reasons. And there's such a tremendous impact that this one plant has on, globally, that, it's about time we're paying some serious attention to cannabis. And I'm thrilled that we actually have a cannabis industry now, and this sector that's thriving. And really, I think 10 years from now, there's going to be so much advancement on the medicinal side, really on every side, on the industrial, use of industrial hemp and everything. I think that, we're going to look back, at the 70 or so years that cannabis was sort of put on the back burner and demonized as a really dark point in our history as humans, right?
Kids in the future are going to look back and they're going to be talking about some new substance and be like, oh, that's not going to work. And be like, yeah, that's what you guys said about cannabis all that time back then. Okay. I want to transition back because I can sit here and I just want to run with the Israel thing, the economy thing, everything that cannabis can do. And we can talk for hours on that. But your entrepreneurial journey to me is awesome, right? Because you went into this nascent industry with no history of finance, and you're now sitting at the top of one of the premier funds in the industry. So not only is your cancer story inspiring and your passion for cannabis inspiring, but just the relentlessness that you went after doing what you wanted to do is also inspiring. And I'm hoping that a lot of people can watch this and learn from your story, right? So, you had that experience, you've been an advocate, you came from LA, and then all of a sudden now, cannabis is legal. How did you first dip your toes into the cannabis industry? Because I know early on, it wasn't very easy to get into because it wasn't that big.
That's right. Great question. It's such a good story. So in 2010, right, I get a call, and what I was doing at the time is I was actually manufacturing reflective safety apparel. Okay, so I was making collars for pets, right, that were reflective. So if you're up early and jogging or walking your pet, your dog primarily, early in the morning or late at night, and there's low visibility, you can ensure that you wouldn't be hit, or if the dog were to get loose, God forbid, that the dog wouldn't be hit, right? And then I started making reflective apparel for joggers with licenses from most sports teams, and so it was real fun, and some entertainment licenses as well. So it was a lot of fun for kids to start being safe, right? No one wants to put on a helmet or elbow pads and all that stuff, but if a kid can put on their favorite sports team or their favorite character from a cartoon or whatever as a reflective slap wrap, they'll do it, right? And so I was doing that for a little bit. And interestingly enough, it also a long story. I actually was manufacturing for most branches of the military. I didn't know this when I started, but the military requires everyone to wear the exact same reflective belt that I was making for runners and for people walking their pets during PT. And so I started getting these orders from like forward operating bases in Kandahar and all over the place. I'm like, what is going on? And so I researched a little bit and realized, all right, so just change the packaging, and I've got a reflective PT belt, and was selling it for significantly less than competitors were. And so I was doing that for a bit, and all of a sudden I get a call from a good friend of mine one day, and he says, I'm working for these two ladies who were, they won a cannabis license in New Jersey, and they have absolutely zero experience when it comes to cannabis. And the two groups that they had brought in to fund the project were denied, right? For whatever reasons, the local government there was saying no. And so he said, I'm pretty sure that with your background and network out west, you can bring in the operational, expertise necessary. And I think you've got the between yourself and some of your high net worth friends, you guys could bring in the funding that this would require. And so I started digging in a little bit more, and he was right. They had no clue how to run a cannabis business, and they had no money. And so we came in and very quickly developed that project, which today is Harmony Dispensary in Secaucus in New Jersey. And after that project was done, I had several high net worth friends, mostly the ones I didn't tap for that project, call me up and say, hey, I wanted to get in on that. And I said, all right, listen, there's plenty of other opportunity. This is super early. This industry is just about to get started. And sure enough, at that time, that's when, if you remember back in like 2010, 2011, that's when like NCIA and MJ Biz and some of these other associations were just getting off the ground. And so I was, one of the early members at most of these associations and organizations, and would travel to all the different conferences. And it wasn't that difficult. I'm a networker. I'm a people person. And I was super curious, right, about all things cannabis. And so to have maybe 300 people was like the max at some of these events, right? And the booths were super elementary. It was just like, a table with a tablecloth and some brochures right back then. And I was able to really grow with the nucleus of the industry, excuse the pun. And so I had all these different opportunities, right, on the sidelines, and I was doing some diligence, and I understood real well what I was looking at. But as you said, I don't have a finance background. I am an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur for as long as I can remember. You know, as a medical patient that found efficacy with cannabis, and as somebody that was very close to the legacy market back in LA, I had all these different, you know, sort of glasses that I was looking and seeing the industry through, but never thought of myself as an investor, right? And again, because I just don't have a finance background. And slowly, these high net worth friends of mine started asking me, well, you've got these great deals you're telling me about. Are you doing any more deals? And I said, well, you know, really my vision here is to build something that looks like any other investment management firm on Wall Street for any other sector. You know, one thing if I'm taking my money and one or two buddies, you know, capital and putting it to work. But if I'm going to really, you know, either form a fund or manage capital, it had to be done right. The same way I knew that if we were building out a cultivation in New Jersey, it had to be done, you know, not like a scaled up basement grow, right? It had to be done fully automated. It was under the noses of the pharmaceutical industry in Jersey. And the same way, right? If we were doing this on the East Coast, in New York, on Wall Street, this had to look like any other sector. And that's what would provide validity and credibility to the investment community. And so that's exactly what I did. I brought in, through some mutual friends, I was introduced to the gentleman who's my partner today, Asher Trophy, who for about a decade was on Wall Street. And his philosophy, believe it or not, I did not know what an impact investor was, right? I understood, you know, I said, well, why do you want to do this with me? And he said, I like to make money by doing good, right? It's as simple as that. You know, he didn't have, you know, a cancer story or someone he knew, but, you know, with cancer or somebody that was, you know, using cannabis for medicinal purposes, but it was just as simple as that for him. He saw this as what I know now as an impact investing environment. And for so many different reasons. And so in about 2013, that's when we started Tress. And it's a, you know, combination of his last name and my last name. Some people confuse it with trees. It's Tress. And that's Trophy and Hess. And that's exactly what we did. We brought in people that, you know, really had institutional backgrounds and the kind of experience that, you know, investors on Wall Street were used to. And that's what we did. We started investing early on into companies that had operators that we were friendly with for a little bit. So one example would be Headset, right? So we've known the guys at Headset when they were still at Leafly, right? And when they were selling to Privateer, they had a little bit of time that they had to stick with them until they could leave and start something new. And once they did, we were right there with them. And you know, we've moved since then from maybe seed capital investing more to growth now with the maturity of the industry, right? Because that's really been our philosophy. We want to ensure that operators and businesses having a real impact, first and foremost on the industry itself, and then on society at large, but having a real impact on the industry are well funded and well supported. And so for us, that meant, you know, data like a Headset, right? And certainly when Nielsen and others invested with them, you know, a couple of years later, that offered the validity and credibility. Not that we needed that, but it was nice to see, right? That we made a good bet. And certainly you see them today really, really thriving as far as data goes. And some others, you know, like a Baker, which is today part of Tild, which is really, you know, helping create customer loyalty and you know, Cannabis Now, a media company that's providing channels for cannabis operators to really create a brand when there aren't too many traditional channels available to them. And what's cool about that is we were able to parlay that into retail, similar to what Elle Magazine did with Elle Decor. we were able to take Cannabis Now's expertise and reach and open a store for them really at the heart of Los Angeles, right? Where LA and Beverly Hills converge. For your audience that's familiar with that area, it's at the corner of the Beverly Connection on 3rd and La Cienega. And so it couldn't be more of a normal looking retail store in a normal place that, just again, it's that credibility for cannabis. And it allows, consumers that may not venture into a dispensary just yet because they're a little intimidated or for whatever the reason may be, especially if they're only looking for a CBD product. Where do they turn? Where do they go, right? There's e-commerce certainly, but if they want to walk into a store where there's experts that can really walk them through everything from cosmetic, to pet care, to personal care and everything in between, containing hemp and CBD, there needed to be a place for that. And so that's what we've done with Cannabis Now. And so, really the thesis for us is all about impact and like my partner, really lives for, right? Doing well by doing good. And that's what really drives me at Tress. And I think, like you hit on, it's the resilience factor, the grit that I've experienced as a cancer survivor, a cancer patient, cancer survivor, as someone that lives through pain, right, every single day. That takes quite a bit of grit to get through the day. And as an entrepreneur, right, you cannot be a successful entrepreneur without a good amount of resilience and grit. And so it helps me recognize those character traits in the operators that manage the businesses that we look at on a daily basis. And it really informs me, right? I mean, there are so many businesses doing relatively the same thing, right? In our industry, it's a new industry. So you might have, I might see hundreds of decks, in a month of literally the exact same type of business. So what is going to differentiate that from the other? It's going to be the operator. It's going to be, have they endured an experience in the past that, that proves their ability to pivot, that proves out their grit and their resilience. Because as you know, Todd, things don't go, the way we planned typically, right? I mean, look at 2020. Who would have thought this was going to come? I mean, so if you don't have that in your DNA, then you might need to have that, that story that gets you into cannabis. Because without that passion, or without being, a true impact investor, or without, for one reason or other, wanting to see that validity play out with cannabis, and you don't have that grit and resilience, it's going to be really tough to do well in this industry. It's not as simple and it's not as easy as some people, think it's going to be when they enter the cannabis industry. It's very, very complicated. It's very compliance heavy. It's very regulatory heavy. And you see it. I think, not everybody that's invested in cannabis has done well. And I think our track record speaks for itself. And that's because, again, we look for the greater impact and not to say that, any, business that doesn't have that impact won't be profitable and be a good investment. There are plenty of those. But for us at Tress, again, we just, especially at the onset of this industry, it was super important for us to ensure that the legs of the industry were properly supported.
I think you and your partner are a phenomenal fit together. And I'm not just saying this because you're on the show, but I've looked at my fair share of investment funds, and to have someone with that traditional Wall Street background paired with a true operator, someone who, has been in the captain's chair in a lot of businesses, and you've been, you've got your hands dirty. I think a lot of investors, when they don't have that experience, they can look at a company and miss something. Miss something special in the operator or the management team or the business plan, whatever it is, because they look at everything from very macro, high level view as an outsider looking in, whereas you can might be able to catch that little sparkle of something that your partner may miss, and vice versa. There might be something where he's like, listen, I've seen this 100 times. It never works out. And you're just passionate about it. And I think that natural complement I love what you said about the impact investing. I had someone, as a friend of mine, that I talked to, and she had exited a company, and she'd done very well, extremely liberal person. And she said, Todd, I can do two things. I can donate my money to charity and hope they take part of it and do some good with the world, or I can just take my money and directly give it to companies that are doing good in the world and actually make a living while doing that as well too. So I chose the latter. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that type of investing. We look at Wall Street, especially in today's climate, and Wall Street is villainized, right? But I'd like people to understand that Wall Street is not the Wall Street of the 80s and 90s. It's not all Gordon Geckos doing, we'll call it water skiing behind all their yachts. There are people out there that are trying to make sure that money goes to the right companies that have an impact focus, that are doing well for the world. I mean, we look at this industry alone, and now we can come all the way back. We did the flashback to your career here, and we talk about all these things that this plant can do for us going forward. I'm actually going to use a direct quote that you said. I don't remember the article, but it says, cannabis is one of those few sectors that governments can identify where with the flick of a switch, revenue and employment can be found, which is incredible. And I think you even said the conservative estimates say that in the state of New York, if they were to go adult use, it would be about $1 billion in revenue.
And we've seen it
in
Chicago. We've seen it now in California. It's not a fake number. It's real.
Yeah. So we're on the verge of what could potentially be another recession or depression, or we don't even know what it's going to be because everything has been propped up by the government until now. Like you said, 2020 has been crazy. Do you think, in your honest opinion, you're in New York, and do you think the legislators are finally going to take a look and say, oh shit, they're looking over the cliff and they're like, we're going to go over that. Maybe we should finally take a look at this cannabis stuff because, like you said, Colorado, California, Illinois, they are making revenue, and we need to get, at least let them be greedy enough to say we need our piece of the pie so the rest of us can benefit.
Yeah. We've gotten close in New York a number of times. Within the past year, there was one point where it was almost inevitable. And if they had figured out, where some of these tax dollars would have gone to, and agreeably, and the social equity program, I think we'd already have that in play right now. Unfortunately, between New York and some of the neighboring states, they weren't able to, really get that together, and so that's what we're seeing, the delay right now. But it's a delay. It's inevitable, and yeah, with the 7 billion plus, and now it's well higher than that, because I don't think anyone expected it to last this long. But if you look at New York City and San Francisco and other major cities, I mean, they're hurting bad, especially on those tax dollars. And so there aren't many other options. Now, certainly $1 billion isn't going to, replace that shortfall, but it's better than nothing. And what about the jobs? I mean, I saw a report recently that we're close to 300,000 jobs in the cannabis industry. And I think they compare that to like computer programmers, right? I mean, we all know computer programmers out there. I mean, to believe that 300,000 jobs are available in cannabis today, I mean, that's very impressive, and it's very significant. And at a point where millions and millions of people around the globe lost employment and are going to have to, won't be able to return to what they were doing before under these new circumstances, cannabis may really be an option for them. And so it's truly one of the most sustainable crops there is on every level. I don't know of a more sustainable crop.
I think what's most impressive about it, digging into what you said a little bit further, is 300,000 jobs when it's not in every state yet. And in the states that it is in, it's not even close to maturity. I mean, take my state, for example. I'm down here in Florida. We have, 30 million people in the state, and we have 14 cannabis companies right now. Now, granted, we have Curaleaf and TrueLeaf, which are two of the biggest in the industry, but there's not that many direct cannabis jobs down here in Florida. And there will be a ton when it reaches maturity. So we're at 300,000 jobs with a significant handicap. And then the other point of it that I also like to make, I'm really just playing off the points that you made at this point, is that it's bringing back blue collar jobs. It's not, listen, computer programming is great, and it's definitely something that people need to study and understand. But if you're a truck driver, if you're a factory worker, if you're a retail employee, a service industry professional, and you lose your job, there's a learning curve for you to go become a computer programmer. You've got to go back to school. You've got to take classes. Maybe you can learn it on YouTube and Google, but you can go work in a dispensary, or you can figure out how to work in a grow. They'll teach you pretty easily. Or, you know, you could be a delivery driver. There are blue collar jobs that are coming back, but there are also those white collar high tech jobs too. It is a great industry. And I truly believe it will be the resurgence, because you and I, when we look at this industry right now, the mature part of it is medical cannabis and adult use. There's still industrial hemp. There's still the deep scientific side of the medical industry. When we look at medical cannabis, it's adult use cannabis used for medical purposes. And I don't mean to shit on it, but it's just that they haven't had the ability to do proper R&D. There's a comedian, Ron White, and he's got a great bit when he says, yeah, they've come out with medical cannabis and that was great because it helped get me off the illegal stuff. And he goes, he goes, now they have adult use cannabis. I think I'm going to use that to wean myself off the medical stuff. And he just keeps going. But at the end of the day, he's kind of making the point that it's all the same. Yeah. I'm really looking forward to 10, 15, 20 years from now, where something like a Marinol, it has actual cannabis components to it. It's been studied. There's a uniform dose. And I think that is the future of our industry. So off my little rant here, we're at a point in time where those are the two sides of the industry. Do you think what we see today is actually only going to be a small corner of what we'll see 10, 15 years from now?
100%. And not too many people speak about that, you know, or want to publicly, you know, make their opinion known or take a side. I'm fine with it. There are two very distinct channels. Okay. There's the medicinal side, and then there's the adult, maybe even three. Then there's the adult use side, and then there's the industrial side, right? The industrial side primarily going to be using hemp, of course, for fibers, for you know, all types of product. And on the adult use side, we'll just continue to keep using cannabis as we've been using it, but now there'll be you know, testing. We'll know that it's safe to take. It'll be dosed a little bit better. There'll be more options. There'll be, you know, tinctures, beverages, other formats for people to you know, try to be either introduced or reintroduced to cannabis in a new way, and that's very exciting. But as you said, on the pharma side, you know, it's tough because, you know, we're used to Western medicine, right? I mean, back in the day, there were Eastern philosophies, right? You know, you take some herbs, you put it in a tea, you feel better. And next time, if you had the same problem, you did it again. It didn't have to be the exact same dose, right? And you'd still feel better, and that was okay. With you know, now in Western medicine, I get a headache, I take an Advil, I know exactly how many milligrams on it, and we can debate about the variance from Advil to Advil. It's a lot higher than people realize, and they're asking a lot from us on the cannabis side to keep our variance lower than it is from Advil to Advil, right? But we're doing it, right? So kudos to all the science.
Well, real quick, let me interrupt you there real quick. I have a feeling, I mean, the whole dosing thing on the other side of it is, if you dose too much of an opiate, you're going to die. If you dose too much of any other medication, you're going to have liver damage, right? If you overdose on cannabis, well, we haven't seen that yet. So, you know, if you happen to give a double or triple dose by accident, maybe someone's going to be stuck on the couch for a little bit longer, but they're not going to die or have significant organ damage. So sorry to interrupt, but I mean, I think a lot of people miss that point.
100%. And what we are going to see though on the pharma side is we're starting to see it already, but we're going to see a lot more synthetics starting to play in. Like talked about Marinol. I'm seeing, you know, I have seen, you know, quite a few operators, seeing more and more as well, that are able to produce cannabinoids, you know, from yeast and in a lab essentially, right? You're producing cannabinoids at a tenth, maybe, you know, pennies on the dollar, right? You're producing the exact same cannabinoids, and granted, there isn't the entourage effect. It's not a full spectrum type of product, but when it comes to pharma, if we want a specific molecule, if you're looking for CBG, for example, well, you can produce that CBG in a lab in about 3 days versus 3 to 4 months in a field where you'd have to produce at such scale, for that minor cannabinoid that it might not even be worth it, right? And so how is pharma going to really take off? Well, it almost has to be done through synthetic. And it's not a dirty word in our industry. It had efficacy for me in Marinol. I know it doesn't have the same efficacy for everybody, but I'm living proof that it does work for some. And the more and more we learn about synthetics and how they work and why it works, we'll get better at it. But I just don't see any other way that pharma is going to adopt cannabinoids unless they are, consistent and, dosable. And really that can almost only be done through a synthetic. And it's exciting to see that a lot of companies are stepping up to the plate, and we're seeing a lot of exciting things. We're seeing a lot of capital allocated to companies like that as well. So that's really exciting. And so, yeah, biotech plays a massive role in our industry, and we are just scraping the surface when it comes to the pharma side. And obviously we've got some leaders, the GW Pharmas of the world out there, paving the way for everyone, but it's just the beginning, right? And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out with trademarks, IP, all that, right? But certainly we're going to see a lot more on the synthetic side as it relates to pharma going forward. There's no other way to do it. That makes sense economically, that makes sense in so many other ways. So again, it's a touchy subject for some. By no means does that mean that there's going to be less of a demand, less of a need for, phytocannabis, right? Phytocannabinoids. There's still going to be, it's still going to be a multi-billion-dollar industry. It is already, and it will continue to thrive as a multi-billion-dollar industry. So no one should be concerned, when they hear someone saying that there's a place for synthetics in cannabis. There is a home. I believe it's on the pharma side, right? I don't want to, see, adult use type edible companies going and looking for THC, CBD, CBG, and other cannabinoids, from synthetics. I don't love that. Or using terpenes, even for that matter, that aren't phytoterpenes, or even from cannabis. I don't love that either. But there is a place for everyone. And so it's exciting times in this industry. And for those that are outside of this industry, that have expertise in those areas, come on in. The water's warm. We'd love to have you in our industry and really help bring forth, again, the credibility and the validity that this plan offers.
No, 100%. It's funny. I always joke around. The number one question a lot of people ask me, especially my friends, what stock should I buy? How should I invest in this industry? Or did I miss the boat? And I'm like, well, first of all, never ask a podcast host for investment advice, because if you guys see what I do, I'm the one who's learning from all the guests that are on the show. I'm certainly not doling out the information. But second of all, no, you didn't miss the boat. I'm not going to give you a stock suggestion, but the industry that we're looking at, that's what this year is going to be a $15 billion industry, estimated 22 next year, hasn't even captured 100% of the built-in consumer base yet. The black market is still thriving, and it's going to be until we fix our own market. And that's another conversation for another time, but we still haven't even captured 100% of the recreational cannabis users. What might be mature, I don't even know if you can say any part of our industry has even approached maturity yet, right? We're still figuring it out. It's still growing. And then on top of that, people, there's so much more to come. Once R&D comes, once we can do research and development, the industry is going to, grow like a weed, whatever pun you want to put in here. And I hate that our industry has so many puns. And when new people come in, they think they're hilarious because they think we haven't heard them all before. They say working in cannabis is like dog years, is 7 years. I think listening to cannabis puns is like dog years. I've heard 7 years of them in a year. But it's funny to me that this industry is so young and there's so much potential that you didn't miss anything just because it's legal in what, 33, 38 states or anything else there. There's so much further for this industry to grow that I'm so excited that there are people like you in this industry that are, and I said this to Morgan Paxi, I said it to Cody Sanchez, you guys get to architect this, right? And you're doing it the right way. You're bringing in people who want to invest in the industry, but you're not letting them throw money at whatever shiny object there is and whoever has the most advertising dollars, right? And I think it's cool you guys all kind of work together behind the scenes. I'm sure from the outside looking in, people probably think, oh, once it's legal, these funds won't have a need anymore because institutional capital is going to come in. But it's actually something I learned from a conversation that you had about being a strategic investor, about being a value add investor. I imagine that even once institutional capital come in, that companies will still want to seek out a Tress or a Poseidon or someone along those lines because of the experience that you guys have and the fact that you kind of helped shape the beginning of the industry. I'm sure you kind of feel the same way. Otherwise, you wouldn't be wearing that hat and you probably wouldn't keep going to work every day.
That's right. And it goes beyond that, right? And you mentioned Morgan and Emily at Poseidon, or Cody at Entourage Effect and others, right? We're here.
I know you know Matt Norgren too. He's a good friend as well.
Matt, exactly. We're all actually, we just had our draft the other night. It's the coolest thing. What other industry does this? There's about 16 of us, 16 teams, right? All the, value add VCs in the space that we're doing fantasy football. It's great. So you've got and some companies as well. We've got, which is super cool, right? We've got BDS and Headset going head to head. And you've
I don't know if I'd want to compete against an analytics company in fantasy football.
They've got an unfair advantage, right? But sometimes it's good to have that advantage, right? And so, yeah, we definitely talk with most of the value added and active supporting funds and investment firms in the space. And the point is that once institutional capital does come in, yeah, they're going to look to us for support, but more so the operators in the industry need to prepare for that. And that's also, not a lot of people realize, but that's what we do via Tress Solutions. And I know Arcadian does it, Poseidon does it, and Entourage does it, and Artemis, all these great other funds that do it. It's coaching these operators, both inside and outside of the portfolio, right? On how to take advantage of that and how to prepare now, right? 2, 3, 4 years from now, when the massive, right, institutional investors or players come in and want that true M&A, right? A lot of the M&A right now is happening within the industry, right? But once the outsiders come in and start picking up companies, it's too late, right, to start thinking about your governance at that time. It's too late to start thinking about the traction that they're going to be looking for, to acquire, right? You need that now. Now is the time to connect with us, with others, and really understand how to lay out, the strategy for taking advantage of when that time comes. And it's coming soon, especially like we said, with federal legalization or decriminalization or rescheduling. Something is going to happen, right? We know that, right? It's bipartisan. Something is going to happen, whether it happens before the election, whether it happens after the election. Something is going to tip, and it's going to tip soon. And no one has a crystal ball, and we don't know which way it's going to turn. We all have our opinion, but we don't know which way it's going to land. The best thing to do is to prepare for each scenario. And when it happens, and it is a when, not if, when it happens, you'll be ready. And so it's so important to identify who, whether it's a culture fit, whether for whatever reason they're even though we're all great at what we do, there are better fits than others when it comes to advisors and investors. Find your fit now. Use this time wisely, because it's not too late. It is super early. And whether you're an operator or an investor, I can't express and highlight how critical it is to do so with someone like a Tress and or others that really understand where the industry has come, where we are today, and where we're going. And with those advisors, you'll do well. Without those advisors, I no promises. I mean, it's so tough to really gauge. I mean, you know, so many great companies are failing, right? And so
Yeah.
It's not always about the hype, right? It's not who gets the most PR and who you're seeing the most of on LinkedIn or wherever people are finding retail investors specifically are finding their news. They think those are the biggest and best investments to make in cannabis. And frankly, there are some great public companies out there. There are about 300 or so of them out there listed, and some are really doing well right now. But on the private side, that's really where we like to play and offer our support. There are a lot of great operators out there that, with the right support, are going to really thrive and flourish. And we're happy to be those advisors for them and really support them on their rise. Right. One thing that's super unique about us, we don't come in and tell you how to run your business. Right. If we didn't like what you were doing, we wouldn't be talking, right? And so we enhance what you are doing already as an operator, and a lot of times we'll be able to bring in some collaborative options and ideas that you're just not thinking about because you are looking, you've got those blinders on as an entrepreneur, as an operator, and so hyper focused on what you're doing, which is what you should be doing. That there's a need for somebody that has a little bit of a higher vantage point, if you will, that can help guide and sort of point out where some great collaborative efforts reside right now, especially over 2020 when a lot of that's going on.
I think that's my favorite part about this industry is the fact that everybody in it is so passionate, and I say it on every episode, like, listen, there are people in this industry, just like any other nascent industry, that are in here to try to chase the money. But I don't want to say it's easy, but they're distinctive. When you have a conversation with them, you can almost tell, right? Like, you're not in this for the right reasons, and listen, in most other industries, that exists a lot, especially if you were a traditional VC or a private equity group. There are people who are really good at something they're not passionate about. It happens. I've had a job in the past. I was really good at something. I hated that job. I did it for 8 years. I went every day and I hated it. It made me a good amount of money, but I didn't want to do it, but you get into this industry and the problem is everyone's so passionate. So it's like, okay, now how do I find the people who are passionate and are also really good at it too? But I think it's a distinct problem that we have, and that makes me so happy to be here every day. And you want to cheer for everybody because everyone's doing what they love and you want to see them. But I really think when we fast forward, the amount of case studies that are going to come out of the cannabis industry is going to be incredible because you have all these entrepreneurs that are doing their entrepreneurial thing, but with so many hurdles in the way. Losing bank accounts, losing payment processors, not being able to do e-commerce, not being able to do traditional marketing. And I think you're going to be, I even think that someone like Tress, when this industry starts maturing, the trends that you're going to be able to see come out of this industry, you can apply to any other industry because I think they're going to start following the
100%.
The way that we've had to innovate with marketing in this industry alone. I think you're going to start seeing companies across every industry start to rip this off. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong.
No, absolutely. And on the positive side, take lighting as an example. When did you see so much money pour into R&D for ag tech, period, let alone like lighting? And look at the amount of energy reduction we've been able to generate as a result of all these LEDs that we're seeing, right? Granted, there's a little bit of a more of an outlay and cost up front, but again, this is about, of course, the economic ROI. But whether you're an operator or an investor, there's more ROI out there to be had. Where's the impact, right? And if you are on the wrong side of this, if you're growing indoors and not using LEDs, not using sustainable practices, and generating, you know, tremendous amount of waste, you're not helping the problem. You're not helping, right? And so what we're doing in this industry, and that's inside or outside of cannabis, right? Urban farming is huge these days, right?
Yeah.
And if there wasn't as much R&D capital being poured into urban farming techniques and technologies, then I don't think there'd be as much movement as there is today on that side, right? And a lot of that is birthed out of cannabis and cannabis dollars and investment and R&D, right?
We're like, so a lot of people don't realize a lot of technology comes out of the military and military research. The cannabis industry is almost like the military for sustainability. I think a lot of stuff is going to originate here and it's going to permeate throughout the rest of the world. Dude, I can sit here and talk to you forever, but shockingly, we're at an hour already. This tends to happen. Last question.
Yep.
You've seen a lot. You've experienced a lot in this industry, you know, 7 official years on paper. What excites you going forward? You know, what's most exciting to you about the cannabis industry? Which subsector? You know, what are you looking at going forward over the next few years?
So I'm really focused on a couple areas. The industrial hemp side. We are not making allocations just yet. We are gearing up for that and really doing our diligence and homework as far as that goes. But I think we have not even, I mean, we're again, just scratching the surface as far as the opportunity goes on the industrial hemp side of things, number one. And number two, on the tech side, I think that there are a lot of great companies that are trying to help us understand through an app or a different type of product or service about what my cannabis consumption, how it's affecting me, and physiologically, how it's affecting me. And I just feel that without a maybe a wearable or something a little bit more technologically advanced, it's unattainable in the sense that, especially with cannabis, right? After a good indica, right? It's even if it's for me to know for the future, I'm not going to go in and record how I felt and when I felt that way, and it's just not going to happen. That said, why couldn't an Apple Watch or different type of wearable technology, you know, tell me what my heartbeat looked like after I consumed, right? I mean, that's easy, and then we go from there. But wearables, I think in general, are becoming more and more popular. Wearable technology, and I think we're going to be seeing a lot of tie-ins as far as that goes with cannabis and what we're experiencing physiologically, as I said, and that on the hemp side. Of course, you know, data continues to be huge, and you know, I think we're a ways away as far as scientific breakthroughs are. That's really a very, very long play, so it's going to be small increments of success over time. But I think we're going to start seeing some real cool technology soon. And I have joked, you know, we've lost, due to COVID, we've sort of lost this the circle session, you know, where we pass the joint around. But who knows? Maybe there'll be a vape pen manufacturer that comes out with a vape pen that takes my temperature and says, you know, if I pass it, I'm good. I'm clear, COVID free. You can take a hit. Maybe we'll see that. Who knows? And sure enough, about a month later, after I started saying that, I saw this company that produced a COVID test that almost looks like a vape pen. You blow into it, similar to, you know, a device that you know, tests if one's impaired or not from alcohol. You blow into it and it tells you if you've got COVID. Well, looks a lot like a vape pen to me. So you never know. You never know what COVID, you know, up against the wall because of COVID is going to create. But certainly in technology, we're going to see a lot as far as that goes. And then finally, I think, you know, as I mentioned earlier, you know, we're truly an impact, you know, impact investors. And what you know, there are a lot of like-minded investors out there. There are a lot of operators that tout sustainability and impact, which is fantastic. But how are they measuring that? And are they measuring it, right? And so that's the ROI that we're looking for, especially investing on the private side, well before any kind of liquidity, distribution. And we're focused on the outsized financial return. That's why we do this. But if we could start allocating capital as it relates to how you're measuring your impact, I think that could be something very helpful for our industry. And so, once the operators understand and know, okay, the capital's there, it's coming in, but we need to do our part as far as governance and everything in between, then I think we'll all be better off for it. And I think we're seeing a lot of that, certainly on from the operator side, just in general, working on core competencies and working more towards profitability versus, grow and expand at any cost, sort of, you kind of saw where that led, right? I think now with a stronger focus on profitability and just being a healthy company, and part of that, especially with bringing in investment dollars, is reporting and the governance side and everything that comes with it, right? Once you bring in VC dollars and outside capital, it's not a family business anymore, right? And so it needs to be run a little bit differently. Usually a board is introduced at that point. And so there are all these great governance aspects, and just in general, the impact and the ESG aspect to investing in cannabis, I think, is going to be highlighted through us and some of our collaborating, those collaborating with us in the investment community. And that will open doors to a lot more, investors out there. There are so many impact investors that don't realize that cannabis is in fact, ripe for investment if you're an impact investor. And I'm hoping to help lead that charge and open those doors, because it's really, really needed. And it absolutely is one of the best places to be if you are an impact investor.
Well, I'm hoping some of the impact investors in my LinkedIn network will see this and they'll reach out to you. As far as the cannabis wearables, Whoop, I know you sponsor a lot of podcasts. Just saying, if you wanted to call up and sponsor this one, I'll make an introduction to David. We can talk about potentially adding this feature. I don't know, but you should sponsor this podcast too. Whoop, we're looking at you. Dude, this has been awesome. I definitely want to have you back. We got to talk industrial hemp. I want to talk about Israel as well. I know you're big there. But we have an hour. I got to put my kid to sleep. Yeah. So really appreciate it, man. Website, social media, anything else that you want to promote? I know you speak at a lot of conferences. You have anything coming up? Let's let it out now.
Yeah, we're going to be at the Global Hemp Day that's coming up September 13th through 15th. And we just talked a lot about industrial hemp, and it just some more insight into either for investors where they can invest outside of, this sexy THC market. Not that anything's wrong with that, but just to explore some new areas. It'd be a great place to check in. And then for operators as well, coming into the industry, who might not have thought about the hemp side of things, tune in. It's going to be great. A lot of great experts there on presenting, and then on panels as well. And then ArcView is going to be hosting a pitch conference. And so that's going to be real exciting coming up. Also, we've got the Investor Hot Seat. That's at the end of the month as well. So look for me on LinkedIn. Look at us on our website, tresscapital.com. And of course, for those needing some support with M&A strategy, or even just to look at your deck, we do that through Tress Solutions, tress.io. That's Tress Solutions. And point is that whatever side you're on the investment side or operator side, we're here to offer support. Please use us. We've got a great track record, and you won't be disappointed.
Awesome, man. Well, I'm actually going to plug, we have the Emerge virtual conference coming on. If you guys watched the lab report on Friday, Charles Warner of Cannabis and Tech Today was on. That started today. It's been an awesome conference. Yours truly, if you haven't seen enough of me on camera, because you see me every day almost, I'm going to be moderating the Canna Beverage panel. It's going to have myself, who's on it. Jake from Cannes is going to be on it. Duma from Province Brands up in Canada. They're a really cool company. They're brewing beer directly from the plant itself. And then we have my good friend Cynthia from House of Saka is going to be on that panel. So that is at, I want to say 6 o'clock tomorrow, folks. So go spend the $25, join the conference. The content's going to be available for 90 days. So if you're worried you missed today, don't worry about it. But check that out tomorrow. And then right before my panel, our good friend Roger Brown from ACS Labs is going to be on a panel at 5 o'clock. So those are two people that you know well. Check it out. David, man, thanks for joining me. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure. Anytime, Todd. And again, you may not recognize it, but you are offering a tremendous amount to our industry and really helping support a lot of people that are listening. And thank you. Thank you for what you do, and for Cannabis Lab, and for everybody that's watching right now and that's going to be listening. Keep it up. We've got a long way to go. It's not too late, as we mentioned, and I look forward to speaking and meeting all of you.
Absolutely, man. Well, next time there's a conference, if that ever happens again, I'll stop, we'll talk, we'll hang out. It'll be fun.
Definitely.
I'm looking forward to it. Absolutely. Well, thank you everybody at home for watching. Check us out on YouTube, youtube.com/elevateyourgrind. Look for live episodes here, facebook.com/Canna Business Group. This has been another episode of Elevate Your Grind. We'll see you next time.